I had mentioned that I'm gonna be doing something pretty cool to the bike, and I had tweeted that out a little about a week ago. Been waiting for parts to come in, but so what I have here, right here, is a jack to put under the bike, because that's important, and this gem. This is actually a big brake upgrade. Get it out. 14-inch rotor by Arlen Ness, and it comes with a bracket right here for relocating your caliper. So that is going to be replacing this little guy. Seeing as the brakes are something that a lot of people complain about, I don't really have an issue with them. You know, I'm not racing around or anything, but I don't, if it makes braking easier and dissipating heat a little better, then fine. So we're gonna get to that. You shouldn't need much from what I understand. You only need, if I remember correctly, it's a 6mm Allen and 8mm, and it should be a 16 for the axle, but I actually couldn't find a 16. It was incredibly difficult, and I actually didn't find one, so I had to get these. They're standard size, and the 5/8 should fit perfectly. Let's just make sure before we start. Works. Fits. So that should be good. I'll be able to get it off and on. There's only one pinch bolt. There isn't one on the other side, I don't believe. Yeah, nothing there. And then you just got, I believe, 5 bolts holding on the rotor. So, and obviously these 2 for the caliper. It shouldn't be too bad. But let's get her jacked up, and we'll get going. Alright, so for the sake of making things a little easier, we're going to use these things. I know, not a lot of people use this, but they're called instructions. So we're going to read this, and we're going to go through everything, and hopefully everything goes smoothly. The pictures are a little screwed up from stuff. I guess whoever made the instructions got lazy and put picture 5 and 6 on the back, but there's nothing there, so I'm guessing that's that. I mean, we'll figure it out. Can't be that hard. Let's start with the pinch bolts. Got the wheel off. Let's put these somewhere safe. Stock, upgraded. Look at that sucker. This is going to be very nice looking. Got it on there. Now all we got to do is make sure they're torqued properly, just like you would put on a wheel on a car. You want to do a star pattern. I just got to check the torque specs. If I remember correctly, it is 22 foot-pounds of torque. Just got to, hey, my instructions blew away. Instructions found. Torque wrench found. All right, so. Oh, just a quick little note too. From the factory service manual says that you actually need to take the fender off which I don't know why you would. I got the wheel off just fine. So if you want to ignore a step, you can ignore that step. That's not in these instructions. That's in the, like I said, the factory service manual. Torque in an even start pattern to 22 foot-pounds. All right, 22 foot-pounds. We're good. All right, so once I take off the caliper and I put the bracket on, it's going to be these two bolts right here that are going to be 31 foot-pounds. So let's get that off. We'll get the bracket on and torque everything down. And I know you're not supposed to let the caliper dangle, but hey, they're super light. Should be okay. Just not gonna let it jostle around. One thing I have to grab too is a screwdriver. What you're gonna have to do is put a screwdriver between the blades, or I'm sorry, put the blade of the screwdriver between the brake pads. Spread them apart so you can get them back on the caliper. I may or may not have an issue. I'm gonna try and get it on without doing that, but we'll find out. Yeah. Well, let's check out the hardware. So here are the coarse ones, the two coarse ones. Those are going to go right here. And the fine ones are actually going to hold the caliper on, I believe. This is the actual bracket. Now this is what's going to go right here. And good, it only fits one way. Sweet. $31 foot-pounds. All right. And that is the new mount. Okay, so I know I said I was gonna skip it, but I'm gonna use the screwdriver. I'm gonna spread these pads apart. That went in fairly easy. Now we got plenty of space. That'll make getting the rotor back in between the pads a little bit easier. We got the caliper loosely on there. And what we're gonna do is put a little Loctite on there. And the spec for those is the same as the mount bolts. So that's 31. So all that's left now is to get the axle back in. Well, it's in right now, but torque it down. That's 52 pounds, and the pinch bolt is 18. Then we can lower it down, pump the brakes, make sure that the caliper is, you know, the pads are seated nicely where they need to be on the rotor, and that's pretty much it. I gotta show you a little something that was a little concerning when I put the wheel back on. I had mentioned that there's bushings on either side. They actually fit inside of the wheel bearings. So they act as sort of spacers and a place for the axle to rest without being directly on the bearings themselves. What happened was when I put the wheel back on and I had the spacer in, it was kind of alarming the amount of space that there was between the forks and the actual bushings themselves. I thought maybe I dropped a piece of hardware and I missed it, but I put the axle back in, I started tightening it in a little bit, threading it in, and it started closing the gap. So just take it from me that it might look a little weird and it might be a little alarming. You didn't miss anything. By the time you get it torqued down, it's going to look fine, and I'll show you that right now. Right in there, you can actually see, you see the bushing, and then there's space. That gap will close. Let's see if it'll do it for me. So you can actually see the axle spinning. And there we go. Just a little, not a hiccup, but just something worth noting, I think. I just finished everything up. wasn't too bad. It took me a little bit longer because obviously I'm filming stuff, but to give you an accurate measure of time, I'm not entirely sure, but I would say if you have the time, you have all your tools ready, hour and a half tops, you know. And if you're the kind of person that likes to take your time, like I sometimes am, it might take you a little longer, but hey, it's your brakes. You don't want to screw up your brakes. So let's do a little recap. I'll show you how it looks, and then we'll probably go for a test ride. So there's the brake. Quite a bit bigger than stock. You could sort of get the idea from there, from the new bracket, about how far off it was put. So this is a stock mounting hole. This is a new mounting hole. So it moved out a little over an inch. The stock rotor, I believe, is 12 inches. This new Arlen Ness Big Rotor kit is 14 inches. One important note too about this is, let's see if I can manage to show you. If you could see, it might be a little difficult. There you go. The rotor is actually offset. So the instructions weren't very clear, and I wasn't entirely sure of what to do. But the rotor itself, the braking surface, is pushed outwards versus where it mounts to the wheel. So it pushes it out a little farther, and the caliper obviously has to move a little more outboard. And that's mainly so when you put the caliper on, it doesn't hit your rim. So they were thinking when they did that. Yeah, really the only two things you got to worry about to get the axle off or out, to get the wheel off, is this. I don't even know if you would call it an axle nut because it's part of the axle, but this is actually 16 millimeters. I used a 5/8 and it worked perfectly fine. It's so big that it's not going to get rounded, and you're not putting all that much force on it. When you're retorquing it, it's about 52 pounds. The pinch bolt here is 18 pounds of torque. So you're not putting horrible stress on things. It's pretty easy to get them out. You Loctite things because you don't want them vibrating loose. And that's really it. I had mentioned before that the forks actually sort of spread apart and you end up having quite a bit of a gap. But once you get the axle back in, you torque it down, it's perfectly fine. So it just looked weird. It was a little disconcerting when it was happening, but it's fine. I also mentioned how in the factory service manual, to remove the wheel, it tells you for some reason to take the fender off. I don't know why. I did it without taking the fender off. I can't see a reason why you would have to take the fender off, but you know, I guess that's what they want you to do from the factory. But yeah, pretty simple, straightforward. It's much easier than doing it on a car, and yeah, it looks pretty badass. But enough of that. Let's get on the bike. Let's go for a ride. We'll see how it performs. Alright, so I got about 10 miles on the new brake, and so far so good. I did a little bit of city riding. I did some, I don't want to say high speed stopping, but you know, from about 60 miles an hour and slowed down relatively quick. I don't want to be too rough on it yet because it's brand new and I'm sure it's got to be broken in just a little bit. When I first left my house, it felt a little, I don't want to say squishy, but it didn't feel like it was biting very hard. And I expected that because I figured there's got to be like some oil or coatings or whatever from machining the rotor itself. But now that I burnt that off and I'm you know, doing some regular riding, everything feels good. I can't say that there's a drastic difference in braking power necessarily, but it definitely feels different. Oddly enough, it feels a little bit harder to brake, but for that little bit more effort, I feel like I'm getting more power. It's kind of hard to explain. I don't feel like I'm doing more work, but I feel like I'm braking better. That's the best way I can explain it. It doesn't feel as twitchy as the stock brake. Like, it doesn't... Again, this is hard to explain unless you just experience it. And I'm going to do my best to explain this to you. But like I said, it doesn't feel as twitchy as the stock brake. It doesn't feel like, you know, on some cars, if you even touch the brake, you could feel it dive a little bit. The stock brake was a little bit like that, and then it would just level off the power. So on this brake, it feels, I don't know, I feel more confident. The braking feels smoother and less jerky. Was it worth it? I don't really know. I gotta spend some more time with it. I think it's one of those things that is more for looks than actual performance. Because what you're getting, as far as performance is concerned, you're not getting a whole lot more. You're not getting more pistons in your caliper. You're not getting a better caliper. You're not even changing the caliper. Really, all you're doing is getting a bigger rotor, and you're moving the center of rotation. You're essentially giving yourself a little bit more torque is the idea. So you should get a little bit more braking power. Like I said, it's a small difference, but it looks cool. And I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of why I got it. The Arlen Ness rotor looks really nice. You know, like parking lot nice. It's really only, you're only gonna notice it when, oh God, so bumpy right there. You're only gonna notice it or see it when you're in a parking lot or something. But I'm okay with that. I like to look at my stuff. I don't know. I like it. I thought the idea was cool. Like I said, I'm gonna have to spend some more time with it. And this is just my initial impression because I literally just put it in about, I don't know, what time is it? 3:40. I put it in like an hour or two ago. And I haven't had the time spent with it to really give you an in-depth analysis. And I will do that later down the line. I don't think it's fair to judge it based on, 15 miles at this point. So, initial impression, bottom line, I like it. It looks cool. And if that's all I get out of it, I guess that's good enough. It's not like it's ever going to really wear out. I mean, unless you're doing a lot of high-speed stuff and braking hard and, you know, your brakes are overheating routinely and you warp your brake. Then I could see it being a problem. But otherwise, it shouldn't wear out. You should have it for the life of the bike, I'd imagine. I could be wrong. I've only had this bike for a little while, and I've only been riding for, I want to say 2 years, maybe more. But I'm giving you my perspective, and that's it. And I don't want to ramble, so that's my initial impression before I make the video too long. That's it. Look forward to another video in the future for a more in-depth review. And I also want to put this out there. I have something else cool that's coming in the mail. Well, it's technically not in the mail yet because it's still being built. So that's about the only hint that I'm going to give you. It's being built, it's being fabricated, and as far as I know, it's the only one that you can kind of buy online. And I honestly, I could make one myself, but I'm lazy sometimes, so. But anyway, I don't want to give it away. You're just going to have to subscribe to my channel and keep checking back, because I want to do some cool stuff. And I'm going to review my gear and any new gear that I get. So keep an eye out for that. I do get questions on my gear, and I do my best to, you know, let people know, and I'll give you my 2 cents on that stuff. But anyway, keep an eye out for that and all videos, and I'll see you later. Bye.